All right. So, we've all heard about the mystery surrounding Bitcoin's creator, right? Satoshi Nakamoto, the shadowy figure who pretty much vanished into thin air after giving the world this revolutionary cryptocurrency.
Right.
But it seems like every few years, someone comes along claiming they've finally cracked the case, like they've found the missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we're diving into today. You sent over some really interesting articles about this HBO documentary that claims to have unmasked Satoshi. And, the Bitcoin community is, shall we say, less than convinced. They're basically saying the documentary's conclusion is, well, pretty shaky.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. This documentary, Money Electric, The Bitcoin Mystery, it basically puts a guy named Peter Todd, a pretty prominent Bitcoin developer, in the hot seat, saying he's the one behind the Satoshi mask.
Right. And they lay out this chain of, what they call circumstantial evidence.
Okay, so what kind of evidence are we talking about here?
Well, for one, they highlight Todd's early interest in cryptography, which, if you think about it, Bitcoin is all about complex cryptography, so it's not that surprising.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They also emphasize his, undeniable expertise in the field, even connecting him to Adam Back, another early Bitcoin figure who is known to have interacted with Satoshi online.
Right. Adam Back, that name rings a bell. So they're basically saying Todd had the knowledge and the connections, but is that enough to, pin the whole Satoshi thing on him?
Well, the filmmakers seem to think they found something even more damning. They point to a forum post from 2010, claiming that in this post, Todd accidentally responded using his real name instead of as Satoshi.
Whoa, hold on. So they're saying he basically slipped up and revealed himself.
That's what they're implying. They even go on to point out that Satoshi's online activity often spiked during summer breaks, which, conveniently enough, lined up with Todd's academic schedule at the time.
Huh. So they're building a timeline, a pattern of behavior. Okay, but here's the thing. If this evidence is so compelling, why is the Bitcoin community pushing back so hard?
Well, the first thing to know is that Todd completely denies being Satoshi. Flat out denies it. In fact, he's actually gone so far as to call the accusations ludicrous, saying they put his safety at risk.
That's a pretty serious claim. I mean, what kind of danger could he be in just from being linked to Satoshi? We're talking about an anonymous creator of digital currency here.
Well, you got to consider this. Satoshi is widely believed to hold something like 1.1 million Bitcoins.
Whoa.
And at today's market value, we're talking about $67 billion.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. So imagine you're suddenly publicly and maybe even falsely labeled as the owner of that fortune.
Yeah.
You instantly become a target. I mean, think about it. Everything from harassment to extortion, people coming out of the woodwork. Todd's actually said he's had to go into hiding because of all this unwanted attention.
Geez, I mean, that's a scary thought. It really highlights just how high the stakes can be in this world of cryptocurrency. But for a second, let's play devil's advocate here and say, what if the documentary is right? What if Peter Todd really is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Right.
What would happen if Satoshi's identity were definitively confirmed? I mean, what would the impact be?
Well, first of all, if those 1.1 million Bitcoins suddenly started moving, it would be like a financial earthquake.
Okay.
You got to remember, that's a massive chunk of Bitcoin's overall scarcity. It'd be a huge shift in the very foundation of Bitcoin's perceived value.
Right, yeah.
We'd probably see this massive sell-off, triggering all kinds of crazy price fluctuations.
That sounds like total chaos.
Oh, and the fallout. I mean, it wouldn't just be about the price of Bitcoin itself. It'd ripple out way beyond that.
I bet. And what about, governments and regulators? Wouldn't they be all over this?
Oh, absolutely. Up until now, Bitcoin's kind of been operating in this, relatively unregulated space. But a confirmed Satoshi would force governments and corporations to get real serious about Bitcoin. They'd have to grapple with its legitimacy, its impact. We'd probably see a whole wave of new regulations as they scramble to, exert some control over this thing that suddenly became very, very real and powerful.
And for Satoshi themselves, well, as you said, it would be a whole new level of scrutiny, a whole new level of risk.
Right. Imagine the constant media frenzy, the legal battles, the security concerns. It'd be life-changing, to say the least.
Okay, so it sounds like the documentary makers maybe didn't really think through all the potential fallout of their claims. You mentioned earlier that the Bitcoin community is pretty skeptical of this whole thing. What are their main arguments against it?
Well, a lot of Bitcoin experts and enthusiasts are saying the evidence is just too thin. They're saying, the documentary went for a sensational story instead of doing the real research. For example, They point out that Todd would have only been 23 years old when the Bitcoin white paper came out. That's the document that basically outlined the whole concept of Bitcoin.
Wow, 23.
Right.
That's pretty young to be starting a financial revolution.
Yeah. A lot of people in the community just can't believe that someone that young could, come up with this complex and revolutionary technology all on their own.
So they're saying it's a credibility thing, basically. Like, he wouldn't have had the experience.
Right. Exactly. And they also have issues with that smoking gun, that forum post, where Todd supposedly slipped up and used his real name.
Mm-hmm.
They point out that Todd's username back then was actually Retep.
Wait, Retep, like
Yeah.
Peter backwards.
Exactly.
Okay, so if he was trying to stay anonymous as Satoshi, why would he switch to his legal name? Especially on a public forum like that.
That's their point. They're saying it just doesn't add up.
So it sounds like the Bitcoin community is standing behind Peter Todd, and not just because they're skeptical of the documentary, but because they want to protect Satoshi's identity, the mystery of it all.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. The mystery of Satoshi's is like intertwined with the whole idea of Bitcoin, the decentralization, the anonymity, the freedom from traditional power structures.
It's a powerful image. So we've got this documentary making these bold claims, a prominent developer denying everything and potentially facing real danger, and this passionate community defending both their creators' anonymity and the integrity of their beloved Bitcoin. It's a pretty wild situation.
It really is. And it brings up some important questions about, the ethics of investigative journalism, the responsibility of sharing information that could be harmful. We're talking about the balance between transparency and privacy in this digital world we live in.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the question of Bitcoin itself. Could uncovering Satoshi's identity actually be bad for its future?
That's a really interesting question, and it's one we're going to explore further when we come back. So before we went to, that little break there, we were talking about a pretty big question.
Mm-hmm.
Is figuring out who Satoshi Nakamoto really is it actually good for Bitcoin, or could it actually hurt it?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and it really gets at, what Bitcoin is all about.
Okay.
See, I think this whole thing about wanting to unmask Satoshi, it's not just about being curious.
Right.
It's about control.
Control.
Governments, corporations, a lot of them, they've always had this monopoly on financial systems.
Mm.
And Bitcoin, it's a threat to that. They don't understand it, so they want to know who's behind it.
Right, like if they can put a name and a face to it, they can somehow control it.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Bitcoin is designed to be decentralized. Trying to regulate it, trying to suppress it, it could backfire big time.
How so?
Imagine this. You try to clamp down on Bitcoin. What happens? It gets pushed underground. All the innovation, the transactions, they go into the shadows of the internet. It becomes harder to track, more volatile, maybe even more risky.
Okay, so revealing Satoshi's identity could bring a lot of unwanted attention and control, potentially harming Bitcoin. But what if the mystery continues? What if we never find out who Satoshi is?
Well, think about it. Satoshi stayed anonymous for all these years, right? That's powerful. It reinforces the idea that Bitcoin is truly decentralized. No single person or authority calling the shots, just the users and the technology itself.
So Satoshi's anonymity is actually kind of essential to the whole philosophy of Bitcoin.
Exactly. It's about privacy, individual empowerment, not being censored. It's a shift in power, a way to be a part of a global financial system without needing those traditional gatekeepers.
I see. So let's get back to Peter Todd in the documentary. He said he's worried about his safety because of all this. Given, all the money supposedly tied to Satoshi, do you think his fears are legitimate?
Honestly, yeah, I do. Think about it. He's being linked to, billions of dollars?
Mm-hmm.
That makes him a target, no question.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even matter if he is or isn't Satoshi. The accusation alone puts him in a dangerous position.
It's ironic, isn't it? This documentary, trying to expose someone, might have actually put them in danger.
Yeah, it definitely shows how, things can backfire in the digital age. You got to be careful with information, especially sensitive information. It's about responsibility. You have to think about the potential harm before you put something out there.
This makes me wonder, couldn't the Bitcoin community itself figure out if Peter Todd is Satoshi? I mean, that they know this technology inside and out. Shouldn't they be able to prove or disprove it?
It's trickier than it sounds. See, one way to prove who owns those early Bitcoins would be to move them. Like if you could show that you have access to the wallet where they're stored.
So it all comes down to the wallet. Is it like the key to the treasure chest?
Kind of, yeah. But here's the problem. We don't know for sure which wallet belongs to Satoshi. There are tons of early Bitcoin wallets that haven't been touched in forever.
So even if Peter Todd moved some Bitcoin, couldn't he say, like, someone gave it to him or he found a wallet or something?
Exactly. It's hard to prove. And it's interesting because even with blockchain, which is supposed to be all transparent and permanent, it's still hard to prove these things, for sure.
Yeah.
It ends up being a lot of guesswork and interpretation, which is how you get situations like this documentary, making claims without real proof.
This is making me think about, identity, anonymity, all that. If we can't even say for sure who created Bitcoin, what does that say about tracking anything in this digital world? It's kind of scary.
It's a valid point. This whole case challenges how we think about identity and accountability. In the real world, we have records, IDs, but online, it's different. Anonymity is powerful, and as we've seen, it can make it almost impossible to figure out where things came from or who did what.
So is this just the new normal? Are we going to have to get used to not knowing for sure who's behind all these innovations?
Maybe. And that raises some big questions. How do we know what's valuable, who to trust, in a world where everyone can be anonymous? It's like we need new rules for authorship and ownership in the digital age.
Wow, those are some deep thoughts. And I'm betting you've got some more insights into how to even start unpacking all of this. Yeah, it's really interesting to think about like how these questions of identity and anonymity are becoming so important, It's like we're figuring out what it means to create, to own things, to be responsible in this whole digital world.
Yeah, it's like a whole new world out there. But, let's circle back to this whole Satoshi thing. What does this, this whole saga tell us about cryptocurrency?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me was how strongly the Bitcoin community is, protecting Peter Todd and this whole mystery surrounding Satoshi. It feels like it's more than just like not believing the documentary.
Yeah, you're onto something there. See, this mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto, it's not just some fun fact for Bitcoin fans. It's a powerful force. It shapes the whole cryptocurrency world. It's got all this speculation, intrigue, mythology even, and that mystery, that unknown origin story, it makes Bitcoin really captivating.
So you're saying the mystery itself is part of the appeal, like it adds to the whole idea of Bitcoin being something different, something revolutionary.
Exactly. It's like this currency that's free from the control of governments and banks. It's got this origin story that nobody knows. It's a symbol of independence, disruption of the system.
I get it. But like we were talking about before, this whole situation also shows the risks of a system where nobody's really in charge, where identities are hidden.
Right. There are definitely downsides. When you don't have clear authority, verifiable identities, it's hard to solve disputes, deal with security issues, hold people accountable. And this documentary, it shows how easy it is to spread misinformation, to make harmful accusations.
So what do we do? How do we balance the good things about decentralization and anonymity with the need for accountability, for safety?
That's the million-dollar question. I don't think there's an easy answer. But this case really shows us how important critical thinking is. Responsible journalism, being skeptical of what you see online, especially with something as complicated as cryptocurrency, things change so fast. We got to watch out for manipulation, misinformation, and really think critically about everything we see and hear.
It also makes me think about the whole idea of doxing, revealing someone's identity without their permission. Even if the documentary people thought Peter Todd was Satoshi, they put him at risk by saying it publicly.
Oh, totally. This brings up some big ethical questions about investigative journalism. Like, when is it okay to share information that could hurt someone? Where's the line between the public's right to know and protecting someone's privacy and safety?
Big questions, for sure. So for our listener, the one who sent in these articles, what's the takeaway here? What should they be thinking about after all this?
I'd say, think about this. What does this mystery, this Satoshi mystery, tell us about anonymity in our digital world? How do we, as individuals, as a society, balance transparency with protecting privacy and safety?
Those are some deep, deep questions that go way beyond just cryptocurrency. It's about how we live our lives online. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about Satoshi Nakamoto and this whole anonymity thing for a long, long time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive exploring the world of Bitcoin and the mystery of its creator.